Silicon Valley, technology, art, green, and sustainability.
Welcome to another episode of Silicon Valley Tech, Art, Green, and Sustainability. Today I have Rebecca Bender, or Becky as you like to be called, and with the Silicon Valley United Nations Association. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I think I'm so honored to have you here this week. This is a great week to have you. There's a lot going on.
This is a very special week with everything that's going on at the United Nations right now.
And I think it's just so important that you're here and talking about what you guys do. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Are you from the Bay Area? Are you from the U.S. originally? Tell us about you.
Sure. When I was a young kid, my dream, when I was about yay high, was to work for the United Nations. I suppose it was inspired by the stories that some little ladies who traveled all around the world enthralled me with. As I grew older, I wanted to become a foreign exchange student and looked for an opportunity and ended up in Japan with a family that didn't speak any English nor care to learn, and I didn't know a word of Japanese.
So was this after college?
No, it was the first year of college.
Okay.
So that was baptism by fire. I had a wonderful time. It changed my life dramatically. I came back to the U.S. I went to Berkeley, studied political science and Oriental languages, particularly Japanese. But I knew that I wanted to work for the UN, so I tailored my education with that in mind. Then I accepted some scholarships to go to Japan for graduate school, where I completed my master's and PhD studying economics, politics, and law in Japanese rather than in English.
Wow.
And I was the first woman and the first non-Asian to ever pass the entrance exam to the top university in Japan. I don't know how, but anyway, somebody had to do it. So while I was working on my degrees, I also worked for the Prime Minister's office and on something that is very timely now. At that time, the Indo-Chinese refugees were streaming out on boats, and it was a big problem. And so I joined the Prime Minister's office to address that problem. I didn't finish my PhD dissertation because I was recruited by the UN sooner than I expected, and I knew it wouldn't come twice, so I jumped at it and I accepted the appointment. Didn't finish the dissertation, but
And was that there or here?
So the dissertation was in Japan, or for a Japanese university. When I accepted the appointment to the UN, I moved to New York, and I worked at headquarters in New You're
So you were in the headquarters. So
right.
you were working for them at the headquarters, not in Japan.
Correct.
You came back.
Correct.
And then you went back again to Japan at some point?
Oh,
or?
I've been back many times.
Okay.
But once I joined the United Nations, I was based in New York, but I worked all over the world. And it was fascinating. I worked in war zones, which was a new experience for me, not particularly pleasant. And it gave me a chance to really understand how much of the rest of the world lives. And it also gave me firsthand experience of how grateful people are for what the United Nations does to help them even just survive. And the more work I did, the more passionate I became, because I realized that while the United Nations may not be perfect, it's the best thing we have, and it successfully prevented World War III, and it has helped increase the global standard of living for people.
Now, did you have a photo you wanted to share from Japan? Did you want to share that?
And I suppose I could.
Tell us about this, and I'll hold it up so you can talk about it. And then
this is just a funny one.
So we can hold this up so they can,
Japan
while you're talking about it.
Japan was a very, very different experience. A very different language, culture, way of thinking, food, of course. This was my wedding photo. And I offer it only because it's so different from our life.
Another one here.
The white hat that I have on my head in the second photo is to hide any horns of jealousy that might ever develop. And so that's tradition in Japan.
Interesting. I didn't know, when you showed this to me before, I didn't notice the difference.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice this was you at first, too.
Well,
I
it
assumed
obviously
it was
doesn't
somebody
look
else,
like me.
right?
It's a black wig.
Beautiful. So how
Thanks.
long did you live there again?
So altogether, off and on, I lived in Japan about 12 years,
Okay.
doing lots of different things.
And got married there, obviously, and then
yes.
and then did your husband move back with you, or?
Yes, when I was appointed to the UN, he was given a choice, and he accepted an appointment at the UN as well.
That's awesome.
So we got to work there together, and
That's
that was a
wonderful.
wonderful experience.
And then do you have children?
No.
No children. And is your family mostly East Coast, or?
My family's all over the world.
All over the world, okay.
All over the world. Yeah.
So tell us about the Silicon Valley United Nations, but before we go there, I'm going to pull up a slide, and we're going to look at a little bit about the UN first, and you can tell us a little bit about it. So this is the first slide here. Of course, this is the famous.
So this is the General Assembly, where all the heads of state come and give their speeches during the third week of September each year. And this year, of course, Donald Trump and many other luminaries have given their speeches.
Okay, we could pull that one down, and let's bring up the next one too. We got two more slides on the General UN.
And the General Assembly is where many decisions get made.
And it's how many? It's
193 countries.
193.
Right.
So this is directly from the website. It's the key documents that you can click on.
So this
main
is
bodies.
Eleanor Roosevelt, my hero. And in 1958, or no, 48,
48, yeah.
She drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Which there's this book here, apparently is one that you can, this is the cover of the book down below her that's on the UN website that you can pick up to look at that and the history of it.
And the UN Charter was signed actually it was signed on October 24th of 1945.
And it was Roosevelt that?
At the end of the war.
And was it Roosevelt that? We could pull that one down. It also has the resources there. So was it? I think it was Roosevelt that pushed for the UN to go through, right? Pretty sure. So on that screen, and then we can pull up one more, is they're all links that you can click on the UN site. All of these are links that go to other sites and other documents. On the other side here is issues and campaigns that they're working on. The one that I highlighted is refugees and migrants, and then there's some photos there. And then on the other side is the departments and offices and news and media, which I think is a very important one for me, obviously. We could pull that down. The refugee issue, obviously, is a really big one.
So on this topic, the UN addresses just about every single major problem that is of global relevance. Refugees, there's 65 million refugees right now.
Wow.
All over the world. Any minute there are 20 people each minute that are displaced from their home because of war, famine, or persecution. 80% of them are women or children, which is horrific. It's
because they're the ones that get displaced in any kind of war or Holocaust or.
And if you think, well, how many people is 65 million? That's about twice as many people, almost twice as many people as every single person here in California. That amount of people have had to flee their home and are living pretty much a starvation situation.
And the men are either fighting or they're dead. So that's why there are so many women refugees.
Right.
Yeah.
And so UNHCR, which is one of the United Nations agencies, is very, very active in helping these refugees around the world. And UNHCR has activities in 130 countries. There are only 193 countries, so they are helping refugees in over 130 countries. And the budget a year is $7.7 billion. That's $1 for each person on this globe. Which is, when you think of it, it's really not that much to help that many people. So 4.3% of the world's population are refugees today.
That's just staggering.
It's staggering. It's staggering. We take so much for granted.
And we'll cross our fingers that it doesn't become more as things escalate.
Right.
So tell us then about the Silicon Valley United Nations. And people can go to that website and look at all the many things the UN does, but specifically here, tell us about what you guys are doing here.
Sure. So the United Nations associations were actually started even before the United Nations, and their purpose was to educate, inspire, and mobilize Americans to understand the principles of the UN and to support them. So there are over 140 chapters throughout the United States and also many more in other countries. The purpose is to be a grassroots membership organization and to foster a better understanding of what the UN does around the world and to support the UN and to engage in advocacy. For instance, right now, this administration has proposed slashing the UN budget by 40%. The UN budget is a minuscule part of our federal budget. I think it's 1/10 of 1%.
And so
yet
people should be outraged about that.
Yes.
That they should be completely outraged
Yes.
about the fact that 40% of that budget is being proposed to cut.
Right.
Because it does, I mean, if you look at the things that we just listed that the UN does, it's so much, right?
It's so much.
Yeah.
And
And of course, for me, the rights of media is a really big deal, that they protect the rights of media when you're going
Yes.
into, I have several friends that have gone to Croatia and other places during the wars, and the UN helped them get the press passes and help them,
wonderful.
you know, be safe while they're there.
Right.
So, I mean, it just does
the UN
so
does
many
so
things.
much.
Yeah. How many people you think work at the UN?
So there are about 44,000 people working at the UN, but it's kind of hard to define because there's the people that work at the Secretariat. I was one of those. Then there's 40 different UN agencies all around the world. Then there's the peacekeeping forces, but generally the number is 44,000.
Now, and that's the working folks, but then there's volunteers as well. And again,
Yes.
how many people do you think estimate?
Volunteers, oh my goodness, I don't know.
So what about
But-
locally for the
So
sheriff?
locally, we've got 13 chapters in Northern California.
Wow,
All of
okay.
them are quite active, and the United Nations Day is coming up on October 24th, and each chapter will celebrate it in one way or another. And so we are preparing speakers and agendas and interesting events around that.
I'm going to pull up slide, I think it's slide 4 now, and it's the Making the Stand for Peace. So this is the Making the Stand for Peace, which is another issue that you guys
Nice
are working
slide.
on, and we could pull that down. And do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So one of the primary purposes of the UN is to promote global peace and prevent outbreak of another war. And right now, that's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
It could happen any day. We hope not, but that's why
I
the
know, I'm
United
sweating
Nations
thinking about what the news
is so
said today.
important. We've got to make sure that people make use of the UN and talk through their differences and come to some sort of a solution without resorting to nuclear weapons or other types of violence.
So locally, do you guys do a gathering every year to work on this particular issue? And I know there's several issues that you work on.
So we do many different things.
Yeah.
For instance, we always do International Women's Day,
Women's
some
Day.
sort of celebration. We always do United
And
Nations
is that
Day.
fall or spring?
That's March 8th.
March, okay.
We always do something for United Nations Day, which is October 24th.
Which again is
We
coming up.
always do something for Human Rights Day, which is December 10th. This week, September 21st is International Day of Peace, and then the 26th of September is the day for denuclearization, the abolishment of nuclear weapons. Let's hope that
Yeah, that's another
happens.
issue of rockets being able to maybe reach our border soon.
And another thing that we do that I think is fantastic is we have something called an Intergenerational Model United Nations Conference every year. This is awesome.
And is that here?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And anybody can participate. The ones that I've participated in, the youngest person was 9, the oldest person was 92.
Wow.
And any background, any age, you don't have to have any experience or any knowledge of the UN. But the whole purpose is to learn. And so each person is assigned a specific country to represent, and they get to pick a topic. It might be refugees, it might be disarmament, it might be famine, it could be any number of things. And each person then has to represent not their personal opinion, but the opinion of the country that they are representing, and try to get every country to work together to come up with some sort of solution to the problem. Fascinating, really, really fun. People love it. I love
What's
it.
the attendance like for that as well?
Oh, it's usually about 300 or 400.
Nice.
And this year it will be held in February.
Okay.
It's usually held in Berkeley because that's a way that people from all 13 chapters can get to.
It's
get
close to
that
everybody.
location, right?
So for anybody that's actually, since you have so much experience working with the UN, if anybody's interested in working with the UN instead of volunteering, what would you recommend that they study? What would you recommend that they do?
Great question.
How would they go about that?
So, with regard to what to study, I would say make sure you get a solid skill. Maybe it's environmental science, maybe it's marine biology, maybe it's journalism, maybe it's law, but have a solid skill. Something like very broad and general, like international relations, is often too broad
Well,
and
your
general.
law background was probably perfect in languages,
And
right?
then the other thing I would say is study a language. Now, there are 6 official languages: English, French, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, and I'm forgetting Arabic. You don't have to know all those. But anyway, speaking an extra language is always helpful. Now, the next thing is there is an application process. It's fairly straightforward now, much like applying to any high-tech company, I would suppose. It is a long process.
And we could pull that slide up now too.
They
I actually
do.
pulled up online. It should be slide 5 for the career site. So here's actually the center one is an actual person, and they had several people as examples that kept rotating out of who works there and what their positions are. So it's careers.un.org and then /IBW/home and then .ASPX. So people can go there for more information. But it's it's fascinating.
Yes.
And we could pull that down.
And it's a fascinating place to work
And
because
and it's any kind of career. I mean,
Right.
they showed on the
Anything.
site, somebody that has to weigh and deal with things being shipped.
Right.
Trucking.
Logistics, trucking.
Logistics, right.
Sure.
Operations.
things that you would never imagine would be United Nations
Right, and
jobs. They
human
need to be
resources.
done too.
I was
Sure.
in a Uber the other day, dropping my car off and then going to the family business, and there was a man that worked for 24 years in HR, and he was driving Uber. He's retired, and he has like 7 kids around the world. One's a doctor. They're all in different industries, and he worked at the UN for 24 years in
Wonderful.
HR, all over
Wonderful.
the world, not just in New
Wonderful, yeah.
York, but everywhere.
Sure.
So it's just interesting, that,
Sure.
and of course the language. You have to have the different languages.
Right.
So.
And also, I think the other thing is you need to be very flexible. You don't know where you'll be sent. You don't know what sort of conditions you'll need to work under. For instance, one of my first assignments was working in the middle of a war zone. And
So it'd be a little tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You need to be willing to be flexible. People might think, oh, it's so glamorous. Not really. It's fun, it's rewarding, not necessarily always glamorous. It can be very tough.
So would you say that it's a younger person's job then, or no?
No.
Any ages?
Any age. Any age.
Is there a certain technology that you couldn't live without with what you do with the local UN?
Well, actually, I was going to answer that with regard to the UN as a whole, and I was thinking about that. What technology? And I think that since the UN has to deal with so many critical situations around the world, particularly refugees, and they need to transport food and supplies, I think that what my answer would be there would be logistics technology. Now, that's not sexy, but it's essential in order to help people and keep them from dying. As far as our UN, our little chapter is concerned, yeah, I think the technology that we use on a daily basis, the internet, different social media, all of those things are quite helpful. Sure.
I'm going to have the director pull up the next couple slides really quick. Climate in the UN. I mean, there was talk right away of that being cut, and there's so many programs. So here's all the different things they're doing here. Let's pull up the next one. The greening the blue. There's actually a downloadable PDF on that. Sustainable development goals. And then the Convention on Biological Diversity. Go to the next one. So the sustainable goals, development goals, there's a line listing. You have something you wanted to show too. We can pull that down.
Yeah, where did
and these
my
are all
little
clickable line listings when you go to the website.
So
this is really cute.
These are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which all countries have agreed to work towards achieving by the year 2030. There were sustainable development goals for the last 15 years, from 2000 to 2015. They weren't achieved, so this is the follow-on to that. It covers just about everything that is important to us as human beings.
And this is much prettier than the line listing that I wrote, but I couldn't grab the graphics, so thank you for having this here, because this is what it looks like on the website, and they're all clickable to each of these issues, which is the no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, and so on, gender equality, and on, which is just so important.
Right, so important. Thank you.
So now, are you guys doing a lot with this here too then?
Oh yes, very much so. So for instance, for UN Day, we each will be focusing on one of these different goals. Our particular chapter will be focusing on gender equality, but at other times we'll be focusing on different ones. There's so much that needs to be done, and we as individual citizens here in Silicon Valley, we might think, oh, well, I can't make a difference. Yes, we can. Big time. We can advocate for more funding for the UN, both for its programs and for the UN peacekeeping forces. It costs 1/8 of the amount of money to send a US military person to someplace that it does to send a UN peacekeeping force person. 8 times more to send a US military person. So if the US supports the peacekeeping forces, we can achieve so much more than if we tried to do it on our own. And that's true with just about every one of these issues that the UN is engaged in. When countries work together and pool their resources and their knowledge and their know-how, so much more can be achieved for so much less and much more effectively.
So I'm going to go quickly through the next 2 questions, because a couple minutes ago we just had about 10 minutes left, and they kind of go hand in hand. So what's been the biggest challenge and how you've overcome it, and then your biggest accolade for working with the UN?
Oh my!
Kind of goes hand in hand.
I have to think about the biggest challenge. I'm not sure about that. I think one of the biggest highlights was recently in June. I attended the United Nations Association Leadership and Advocacy conference in Washington, D.C. And this is a picture of us. There were over 550 of us from all over the country. We are all volunteers. We all went on our own dime to Washington, D.C. We learned how Congress works. We were trained. And then we went and we met we all met all of our senators and congressmen. And then we met, I think actually every single state's senator and congressman received one of us, and we advocated for full funding of the UN and for funding of peacekeeping forces.
Nice.
That was a magnificent experience. Here in California, all of our senators and congressmen, at least the ones that we met, were very much on board and very supportive. It was very rewarding, and also Dianne Feinstein hosted all of us. There were 65 of us from Northern California, hosted us all for breakfast, and that was a magnificent experience.
How fun.
So it's fun to see, yes, we can make a difference.
Yeah, one voice alone, you can make a difference, but together, it's even stronger.
Right.
I'm going to pull up the next slide. I think we only have a couple more left, and it's our community slide. So what needs does the local Silicon Valley UN need? And we'll pull that down. Do you need more people to write about it? Do you need...
Come participate.
Okay.
Come learn about the UN. Join us. If you have a special issue that you're passionate about, whether it's climate change, whether it's the environment, no matter whether it's refugees, no matter what it is, come join us. We can do something about it.
And writing to Congress right now, right?
And
too.
writing
That's
to
a really
Congress,
big
definitely.
deal.
And we have lots of suggestions for what to do and how to do it on our website.
On the website, that's
yes,
perfect.
both our website and the UNA.org, which is United Nations Association.
Because we don't want that 40% to go away. We want it to stay on some of the programs that are there and some of the ones that they're trying to create as well.
Right.
So we talked about events. Is there any events that we didn't cover? I'm going to pull the next one up. There's one that I was really interested in myself. December 15th this year is the United Nations Correspondence Day, where they give awards to journalists. Some of them are actually in retrospect, journalists that have died doing their jobs. and we could pull that down. So that's kind of an
Wonderful.
interesting thing.
Sure.
We do a meetup. I would love to do something with the UN in the future.
Sure.
That's interesting to you
Sure.
guys. We only have a couple minutes left. So is there any final thoughts? I know I wanted to ask what motivates you to work with the UN. So that was one, and then.
Oh, well, thank you. What
yeah.
great questions you ask.
Yeah.
I think being able to make a difference in the quality of people's lives is what motivates me. All of us on our board, we are each involved in other nonprofits as well. For instance, one fantastic one that I think so highly of is Project Hired,
That's a great
which
one.
provides job search support for anyone with a disability. Another one that I'm very much involved in is the Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired in Palo Alto. These organizations are doing wonderful work. I think that
Don't you do something with the JW House too, or something like that? Yeah, you do a lot of stuff. So you've such an amazing background.
Well,
and
thank you.
I'm very honored again to have you here.
Actually, I don't do JW House, but one of us does.
Okay.
One of us does, yes.
Okay, so that's wonderful.
So my invitation is get involved. Come join us. There's so much that can be done, and working together, we're so much stronger. We can do so much more.
Is there any other future plans you want to share, or any final thoughts too?
Yes, never doubt that you can't make a difference. Margaret Mead had a saying, and it's just slipped my mind, but a small group of committed people can. I'm sorry, I've just forgotten.
Well, did we mention this too yet?
Okay.
Yes, I'm going to hold this up
I've
really
forgotten the exact quote, but Margaret Mead has a wonderful quote about it's just individuals that do change the world. So thank you for asking.
I'm going to hold it up so that you can talk
so
about it.
Adopt the Future is one of our United Nations Association's initiatives. We are raising money to support classrooms in refugee camps. Northern California is the first region to do that. We have already supported 30 kids for 10 years in one classroom, and now we're taking on our second classroom, and in one of the largest refugee camps called Dadaab in Kenya. It's one of the largest. And so we are adopting those 2 classrooms.
That's
Another
wonderful.
initiative is called Nothing But Nets, and that's malaria nets or mosquito nets to prevent people from getting malaria. Malaria causes so many diseases.
I'm getting the wrap up. Thank you so much for coming. That went really fast. And thank you for the audience. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, www.SVTAGS. We do have a meetup group. And make this a great week by conserving, reusing, and rethinking the way you choose to live here in Silicon Valley and beyond. Thank you, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much.